impressed you, Dan, about these 49ers last night without the key cog in their offense?
Fair to say that Brock Purdy over the past couple years has been a top 5 quarterback. I still think he's underrated. If you ask me what I thought was the most important physical asset a quarterback needs to have, it is anticipation and ball placement. That's literally the thing he does best. I mean, the ball comes out of his hands before guys are breaking in their route or getting open as consistently as anybody in the league, certainly up there with players like Tua Tagovailoa, and it's always almost in between either the middle of a face mask or the middle of the numbers, the receiver, Hawk. Yep. For me, I feel like he's throwing marshmallows to guys. Like, it's such a catchable ball. And watch these catches. Very rarely are guys constantly stretching out or in an uncomfortable place to try to go catch the football. For a guy that's performed at the level that he has, I still think he's underrated. I don't know when it comes to the anticipation and ball placement, I don't know how many guys in the league are doing it better than Brock Purdy.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. That throw that he had to Ayuk that he dropped was
the touchdown one that he dropped.
It was a ridiculous throw. And I think that's what's like both scary and frustrating about the 49ers because they have so much firepower at every single position. And even last night when you're watching this tape, like, yeah, you can clearly see all the talent. Now you throw Jordan Mason into that mix. But this is the version of them that are still figuring it out. Like, Ayuk is still getting, acclimated after not being in camp. Again, you throw Mason into this thing, but when you look at Debo, Ayuk, and what they did in the run game, like if you watch them block, they look like two guys, typically when you're a receiver and it's like, oh, the blocking guys, they can't get open. That is not the case for San Francisco wide receivers. When you watch Ayuk, when you watch Debo in the run game, it's no surprise why a guy like Jordan Mason can go in there and do what he did.
I'd also say this. If we were trying to nitpick a point of their football team last year, it was their offensive line. It wasn't great. The way that it looked against a very good New York defensive line last night in that new right guard that they have, it looks like it's going to be a strength for the football team.
Yeah.
Well, and it's
Yeah, so I really want to talk about this, and I can't believe that's how Orlovsky started, because that's literally what I said, that his superpower is his, placement, his anticipation, and his ability to execute Shanahan's offense. And it's just so underrated because, and we've talked about this a little bit over the months, that, the average fan when they're watching, and again, I understand this, that they need things to jump out of the screen for them to be really impressed, right? For them to just be like, that's amazing, that's exciting. It's very easy. When you see Josh Allen, for instance, leap over a defensive player to get into the end zone, like, you don't need to know anything about football to know that that's amazing, that that's awesome, right? You don't need to know anything. But I always use the example is, it's like, what would my mom say? What would my mom see if she saw it? She wouldn't have to know anything about football, anything about these players, anything that they have accomplished, and she would say, wow. That would make her just go, wow. Anticipation and ball placement is not necessarily wow. Sure, if it's a 50-yard, missile down the field, sure, you could say wow. But if it's just like a 10-yard pass, 15-yard pass, even 20-yard pass, it's not going to give you the same wow. And that, to me, that is the biggest reason why people just can't give Purdy his flowers. And they think, well, he's throwing to guys who are open and they're catching the ball. That's Shanahan. And it's like, Shanahan is not processing the game for Brock Purdy. He absolutely helps Brock Purdy, and I'm not going to go on the same rant that I did, I think it was yesterday, where I talked about how, of course, Shanahan makes Purdy, how any great coach makes any quarterback better. That is just the way it is. But at this point, I really am getting tired of any of this, of any of these ideas that it's always the players or the coach making Brock Purdy better. What we just saw in those highlights that had very little to do with Shanahan. Is Shanahan scheming guys open? Is Shanahan having an elite play caller, keeping the defense on his toes? Absolutely. But we have to just stop pretending that we can throw any quarterback in this situation and that they're just going to excel. Again, Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold is actually is going to be a really interesting example of this. And I'm a huge proponent of saying that Sam Darnold is going to be significantly better with Kevin O'Connell, and that his whole issues were, a mix of issues that weren't 100% on him, and that he's going to be a great example. Same thing with Herbert, a great example of how much it matters to have a great head coach, a great offensive coach to help their quarterback. But let's be serious here. We can see the differences between even a Sam Darnold and a Brock Purdy. And Sam Darnold was ranked second for PFF. and Brock Purdy was number 1. But if you watch that tape, you can still see the extra level that Brock Purdy can do. You can still see the accuracy, the anticipation, the ball placement that then takes it to the next level. And so the point that I'm trying to make is that if it was just simply a great offensive run by Shanahan and weapons, we would still be able to see very regularly, okay, Purdy is a little inconsistent, but yeah, he's able to hit his guys, and but like you don't say that. To me, one of the marks of a quarterback who's being really carried by his team is a level of consistency. And Brock Purdy is so consistent. A great coach cannot make you consistent. They can make you more consistent than you were, especially if you were really inconsistent. They can help you get some easy plays. They can scheme guys open. They can help you read the field better. They can help you with those things. But they cannot keep you consistently accurate and have consistent anticipation over game after game after game after game. And that's what Brock Purdy has done. It's why we see backup quarterbacks, they're able to go on these short runs. And this is very common now in the NFL at this point, especially with great offensive head coaches. They can get on runs. They can win 2, 3, 4, 5 games. But then eventually the consistency factor comes into play. And I've said this a lot about backup quarterbacks. Many backup quarterbacks in the NFL have the ability to play great at times. They have the ability to play elite. Even some backup quarterbacks have the ability to look like Patrick Mahomes for a quarter or two, or even a game or two. But they can't consistently do that. If they could, they would be elite. They would be great. You see this all the time in basketball, probably more than quarterback play, that you see players who occasionally can put up 20 points, 25 points, 30 points. And people always say, oh, if only so-and-so can do that more regularly, he would be such a great player, such a piece. And it's like, if he could, he would. If he could do that, then he would be elite. Then you're right. They would be a Hall of Famer. That's what makes Steph Curry so special. That's what makes KD so special. That's what makes LeBron, all these players so special, is that they can consistently be great. Brock Purdy has shown to be consistently great. It's honestly one of Dak's superpowers, and I think Brock Purdy is a way better quarterback than Dak, so don't get too lost in that comparison, but that's what actually Dak's superpower is. Dak is very consistent. I don't think he can reach the highest levels of eliteness or even greatness, but he is consistently good. He is consistently good. So of course, occasionally he has a bad game, but he is consistently good, and that makes you rock solid. Many quarterbacks are very inconsistent, even starting quarterbacks. And it's the swings that make it really hard to game plan. It makes it really hard to prepare going into games week after week because you just don't know what you're going to get. You just don't know. And it makes it really difficult. Brock Purdy gives consistency, which then offers this 49ers offense and just the team as a whole, an identity. You when you have this consistency, you can construct an identity, and that matters tremendously. And it's just funny that it is, like as Orlovsky said, that Brock Purdy is still somehow overrated. Or underrated. I get how we would be questioned him, the first year. I get how you would even just be a little bit leery going in the second year. But he just continues to perform at such a high level that I just don't see how we can just keep doubting how good he is. And I really encourage you, go try to find a bad quarterback, and I don't even want to name any names, just a not good quarterback, I'll say. Go look up highlights of them in a game that they played well in, right? It will look different. It will look different. You will see that it looks different than Brock Purdy. You will see a lot of times when a backup quarterback or just a quarterback who kind of really swings left and right, you'll see that it's just like a couple drives. Oh yeah, he looked great. Well, on the next drive, not so much. That drive, well, that guy was wide open and he was able to rip off for a 30-yard run. That was blown coverage. Like, you can see why some of these other quarterbacks have success. You can't do that with Brock Purdy. You can't keep explaining away why Brock Purdy is being successful. But we can also be honest too about who he is. And I noticed that if I ever try to give a little bit more nuance to who Brock Purdy is, it is interesting. You get, the 49ers fans really have a lot of swings with that regard, right? There is still this idea that they still want to elevate Brock Purdy to legendary status. And I do think that he is a step away from reaching that right now, at least currently. I think there is still some time. People are very much focused on those playoff wins that he had last year, and understandably so. He absolutely stepped up. But I think for Brock Purdy to immediately join the, okay, it's Mahomes and then Purdy and then blah blah blah, and you go down that list, he will have to do more, right? He will have to do more. He will have to have bigger games against bigger opponents in bigger moments, right? He will need to have like an insane duel, like Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, right? Like, and you would have to say, wow, Brock Purdy balled out. Brock Purdy did everything from the jump of that game to the very end. Like, that's what it will take, or to win a Super Bowl. Honestly, actually, I'm not even the Super Bowl, because I think even if he won a Super Bowl with the 49ers this year, if Brock Purdy played as good as he did last year's Super Bowl, they still won't give him the credit. If they almost would have won the Super Bowl last year, and if they did, it would be actually kind of interesting to see like who would have won the MVP. Would it have been McCaffrey? Would it have been Brock Purdy? And if it was, I feel like the segments would have been like, was this the worst quarterback to win an MVP in the Super Bowl? Right? Like, I still don't think he would get his flowers unless he balled out, unless he throws for 300 yards. 3 touchdowns, rushes for 40. Like, it would have to be him really balling out for people to just finally give it. But even then, I think even if he does ball out, they'll still kind of just give the credit to the players. So that's why I think, and Shanahan, that's why I think like a big time back and forth duel, or even just in the playoffs, a big time back and forth duel where you can truly say he played great start to finish, and not he came up big in the end. It's just that he played great start to finish. He did nothing to pull his team down for a second, which technically you can make the argument he did against the Packers and the Lions, right? He didn't come out really sharp. Both those games, he did not have good first halves. And so at the point where Brock Purdy is in his career, people are always going to use that against him. Right or wrong, it's what's used against him. So I just think having him play a big game in the playoffs where he is great start to finish against a big opponent, not against the Seattle Seahawks. Like, it's got to be against the number one Lions, right? The whoever ends up being number one, or unless the 49ers are number one. Like, it just has to be a big time moment, NFC Championship game, or against like who people perceive to be the GOAT, a Patrick Mahomes. I think even a regular season big time game against, say, the Chiefs would go a long way at this point for the Brock Purdy doubters. But it is great to see someone like Orlovsky just straight up at the top be like, Brock Purdy is underrated. Yeah, at this point, I could not agree anymore. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think? Do you think Brock Purdy is truly underrated? And do you agree with Dan Orlovsky that Brock Purdy is a top 5 quarterback? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.